All right. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us here whenever you may be listening to this, another episode of the ETS Travel Podcast. I'm John Cavaro, joined with Bethany Barbary. We're ETS Business Development Managers. Today, we're traveling to Fatima, Portugal, and it's a pilgrimage unlike any other, centered around Mary's urgent call for prayer and peace. It's definitely, when we talk about our Catholic advisors, this is going to be a huge part of those pilgrimages that we offer. You'll see it quite a bit in our promotion.
Oh, for sure. Fatima and Lourdes both are right up there after Rome.
For sure. It's just, I feel like every other request is something that has to do with, Fatima, especially in this case, what we're talking about here. So today we're going to cover what happened in 1917 that made the whole world stop and look at a tiny little Portuguese village. And why does Fatima's message matter just as much as today as it did over 100 years ago? It definitely, I'm learning a lot more about, these pilgrimages and all of that, and I'm educated daily by advisors. So definitely a lot of great history there. And then we'll also share how you can experience Fatima yourself with ETS. Walking where the shepherd children walked, and praying where the sun once danced in the sky. But first, what we'll do is let's meet the three little shepherds whose lives and those visions would change the world ultimately. So did you want to talk a little bit about that? Give us a little bit of the history there, because you are, of course, our history and destination expert here.
Sure. And just to be respectful to the source material and stuff, if you're watching this, you may see me reading just because I want to make sure I get my facts correct.
Absolutely.
So in starting to talk about the children, we'll look at our three main characters here. So you have Lucia, who was 10 at the time, Francisco, who was 9, and Jacinta, who was 7. So they were poor shepherd children from a small village not too far from the site of the apparition, now known as Fatima. So, when they first saw what they believed to be an angel, Lucia is just in awe, just completely awestruck, doesn't know what to say. Francisco, as you read through the story or watch one of the films that's been made about it, he was very contemplated. He wanted to console them more than anything else. And Jacinta, who only 7, just really ended up, after these apparitions and speaking with Mary, decided she wanted to embrace sacrifice. She was known for having given up food and water and even playtime to pray for sinners. So one of the most important things to know about these children and their impact is just how humble they were. They were completely uneducated, like not reading and writing at the time, totally innocent. They didn't have all the things in the world we have now to distract them. They would obey their parents, and they would go out and work with the sheep and work on the farm and things like that.
Yep.
They weren't worldly people. So in 1916, the angel of peace appeared 3 times to them and taught them the prayer, "My God, I believe, I adore, I hope, and I love you." And there's not a more beautiful, simple message that could be passed on to children that's going to be easy for them to understand. They also were given the Eucharist and asked to offer sacrifice for sinners. So we talked about Jacinta and, how she was known for really embracing that sacrifice. And so, as we're talking a little bit more about the story of Fatima, it really begins with formation. God was preparing their small hearts for big missions that would still resonate today. I mean, within 10 years of the events, over 2 million pilgrims had come. And, to this day, you've had hundreds of millions of pilgrims come. So that's the influence and, the legacy of these 3 children. So the most important thing I want you to remember about them and their influence is, holiness isn't just for grown-ups. It really is meant for everyone, and even children can lead us. So talking a little bit more about the apparitions and their specific messages that were passed on to the children. So when we get to May 13th, the children reported seeing a woman brighter than the sun, shedding rays of light clearer and stronger than a crystal goblet filled with the most sparkling water and pierced by the burning rays of the sun. The woman wore a white mantle edged with gold and held a rosary in her hand, and she asked them to devote themselves to the Holy Trinity and to pray the rosary every day to bring peace to the world and an end to the war. So they continued to appear, and she came 6 more times, May through October. And the message was always, especially beginning with that first apparition, do not be afraid. Pray the rosary daily, offer sacrifices for sinners, and devote yourself to Mary's Immaculate Heart.
Right.
So on June 13th, appears again and once again encourages them to pray the rosary daily and talks about taking Francisco and Jacinto into heaven soon, but promises not to abandon Lucia. Going on July 13th, the children receive visions of hell and the 3 secrets of Fatima that we'll talk a little bit more about later. And then on August 19th and September 13th, again came back to remind them to pray and to sacrifice. And then on October 13th, as word of the children had spread, she came back and promised that a miracle was going to happen, the miracle of the sun. And sure enough, it did. So over, the estimates range anywhere 30,000 to 100,000. So pretty comfortably, people say like 70,000 people showed up.
Wow.
So they all went to Cova de Ira. And while they were there, eyewitnesses, including skeptics and atheists, saw the sun dance in the sky. The rain soaked the ground, but people's clothing dried instantly afterwards when the sun came out. And the secular press, which had mocked the children, reported the event in detail. So, there was no hiding it. There is picture evidence, there's all these different stories and people that were there that talked about it, including Lucia, who would go on to write many memoirs and talk about it. So what happened immediately after this miracle? Not too long, sadly, after this, within a year, Francisco and Jacinta died young in the Spanish flu pandemic. So this was 1918. So this was a year later. So sure enough, as had been predicted and told to them in that first apparition, they went to heaven soon. Then Lucia, who would outlive Francisco and Jacinta, she dedicated her entire life and served until her death in 1948 and is still being considered for canonization. And talking a little bit more about some of the mysteries and specifically the 3 secrets of Fatima. One of them, was talking about ends to wars and things like that. And the message throughout all the apparitions was to pray the rosary, pray for peace. If you want peace to come, pray the rosary daily. So sure enough, within a year of these apparitions, World War I did end on November 11th, 1918. So a year and roughly a month after that final miracle of the sun.
And for my personal knowledge here, because I'm learning about these tours every day, as far as in particular, for Fatima, and we have a lot of great advisors that come to us with a lot of times with these tours, it's going to end up being something like a custom request, And what I've been finding, and I don't know if this intertwines going back to the appearances that were made May through October, that seems really between that time frame, most of the requests that we get is between May to October, usually later on into October, maybe some September, some June sprinkled in. Is that kind of why those are typically what is requested, just for our advisors?
Oh, sure, absolutely. In the beginning of May, based on the date of the first appearance, there's a big celebration at the shrine there in Fatima, and then on October 13th, celebrating the miracle of the sun.
Gotcha.
So, lots of groups will go within that time frame of either May or October, because they're trying to be there for those celebrations. It's a little extra special. But in general, like the same times the appearances were happened to line up with generally when the weather is the nicest to be in Portugal. So it kind of works out that, most people are wanting to go kind of like April through October. Once you get to the end of October, it starts getting cooler. But we do have lots of groups that will go specifically in the middle of March and the middle of October to be there for those anniversary dates.
Gotcha. Yeah, because that's coming across my desk. It's like always those months that come up, and that's really cool to know. Like,
and
that history.
October is definitely the most popular.
Yeah, October definitely the most popular. I've even got some requests for December, but yeah,
those people are brave. It's gonna be cold.
Yeah, it's gonna be cold for sure. Yeah, and but I would say most of it is gonna be between those months, and that's really cool to know that
now
history.
you know a little more why of like people want to go in those time periods.
Exactly. Yes. So we learn something new every day, and especially for our advisors that maybe, because this is more going to be like a Catholic focused program anyway. So a lot of advisors, maybe they're not Catholic themselves, but still want to get into that market. Maybe it also would be very helpful for them to know, like, that time frame, what happened, and that's why you're getting those requests there.
Sure. Yeah, I kind of hope it inspires them a little bit to feel more comfortable if they're not Catholic to go and talk to a Catholic group leader and maybe try to encourage them to do a faith-based pilgrimage to Fatima. So for
sure. And yeah, just on that point, because I actually had this conversation with an advisor the other day that was trying to get into the Catholic market, and at least from what I've seen, and I know you have a lot more of these groups than I'm accustomed to. I feel like the Catholics, they really travel as a pilgrimage together more than any other denomination, or is that just me? Like, I feel like they really stick to like a yearly thing that they try to do more so than others.
Yeah, I think it's a little more ingrained. Pilgrimages have been happening. If you look at the Camino, like pilgrimages to the Camino have been happening for almost 16th or 17th century. Like, it's a long time. So the Catholic Church definitely has a long history of the idea of pilgrimage, whereas Protestants didn't put as much value on that for a very long time. And, for some of the younger denominations or non-denominational people, it's a little more of a foreign concept, whereas like, Catholics have been doing pilgrimage to Rome or other places for over 1,000 years.
Right.
So, it's a little more ingrained within the culture for sure. And, most priests go and spend time in Rome at some point and do some training there. So they've had the experience of going to shrines and holy basilicas and special sites. So they learn very early in their career about kind of the importance of it. Whereas like a Protestant pastor, if they've never had the opportunity, like they didn't have the opportunity in seminary to do a trip to the Holy Land or through Greece in the footsteps of Paul or something like that, it's a totally foreign concept.
Right.
So that's why we're really hoping with this podcast we can help educate people more about why you want to go to these destinations and what are the benefits of doing a pilgrimage, so that we can get Catholics and Protestants to travel just as much as each other. And Protestants, you got to catch up, with our 1.4 billion Catholics.
I would say so. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I didn't mean to. I just, for my own personal knowledge.
I know it's an interesting topic, and yeah.
Oh yeah, for sure. So yeah, so then we can jump into a little bit more about Fatima. Obviously, this is what the episode is centered around here. So we'll cover next the 3 secrets of Fatima. So number 1, the vision of hell. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Sure. So the children actually came back and reported in very specific detail what they saw, people burning, demons, and, the idea was that was shared with them so that they could come back and convince people like why it was important to sacrifice and pray the rosary and believe in Christ and convert and those kind of things, because there was a real true penalty if you didn't do that, if you didn't become a Christian and believe in Jesus and his sacrifice for you. And then the second secret of Fatima, being a World War II nut myself, it's really interesting because what it talks about, the prophecy is really about World War II. and the potential persecution of the church that was going to come after that, and a specific call for the consecration of Russia, which, any history buff knows during this time period, Russia had been a Christian country and it fell into communism, and basically Christianity almost disappeared overnight. The Bolsheviks did not believe in Christianity. Lenin tried to stamp out as much of it as he could. He allowed the Russian Orthodox Church to still exist, but it was persecuted to an extent and it was looked down upon, And so this prophecy, all the way back in the time of World War I, talked about a future where there would be another great war that would lead to persecutions and things like that again. And sure enough, in 1938, an aurora borealis appeared over North Africa, Bermuda, California, and even people in southern Europe, like in Paris, saw it. Wow. They literally thought it was fire in the sky.
Wow.
A month after this, as predicted, Germany seized Austria, soon invaded Czechoslovakia, before invading Poland in 1939, officially kicking off the war pretty much 20 years after World War I had ended.
Wow.
So, it's really fascinating, and I encourage you to go back and read what was exactly, conveyed to the children, because it's kind of eerie how it lines up.
Yeah, that's...
And then the third Secret of Fatima talks about a vision of a bishop in white shot down. So this later became linked to the assassination attempt on Pope John Paul II, who was wearing a white at the time, and of course he is the Bishop of Rome, the title for the Pope. So, and the suffering of the church in modern times after that. So it talked about these events happening that would lead to a time of kind of misery and persecution. And not long after that assassination attempt, you saw the scandals come out and things like this. And so, it's been a rough ride at different points in time since then. So it's just one of those things that is kind of eerie how the prophecies and what was discussed really did end up lining up. So
for sure.
Some of the historical impact that came from these, Pope Pius XII consecrated Russia along with the entire human race to Marian in 1952, just as had been asked. And Pope John Paul II, who was again very anti-communist, would again consecrate the entire world to May in 1984, exactly 5 years before the Berlin Wall was torn down and the Soviet Union began dissolving. Pope John Paul II, of course, credited Our Lady of Fatima with saving his life based on that vision from 1981.
Wow.
So some anecdotes. John Paul II placed the bullet that struck him actually in the crown of Mary at the shrine in Fatima. So you can go see a little piece of history there. And of course, Fatima continues to influence world leaders and popes and remind us that prayer can absolutely change history. So the message kind of today with all of this is Fatima isn't just about the past, although it has fascinating ties. It's about our present world and the peace we long for. It's a very simple message that came to the children. Pray the rosary, make the sacrifices, do the work and those kind of things to try to bring peace to the world, because that's ultimately was the goal of the message, was to bring peace and encourage people to turn their hearts towards peace.
Absolutely. No, that's incredible how, the prophecy just unfolded that way, and, seeing that message and then what was to come in World War II there, my goodness, I had no idea of that history. That's why I really appreciate you. We talk offline about history all the time, and I find myself learning so much from you about that there. So yeah, it's really, really cool and an interesting story how that all intertwines with each other there. And incredible. So we're going to have a little bit more for you about Fatima. Of course, it's a lot to unpack about Fatima. So if it's on the longer side, we definitely, there's just a lot to cover there. So before we, jump a little bit further into some more details here, we got to do a quick commercial break, and then we will be right back.
Step into the heart of faith on a pilgrimage to the Marian shrines and experience the grace and wonder where heaven touched earth. Visit the sacred sites filled with peace, prayer, and profound devotion. Places the Blessed Mother appeared. Walk in the footsteps of saints who answered God's call with courage and grace. Celebrate Holy Mass within hallowed walls that have inspired pilgrims for generations. And allow your soul to be refreshed and renewed in the presence of our Lord. Now's your chance to visit the world's most beloved Marian sites. Lourdes, Fatima, Guadalupe, and Medjugorje, and deepen your faith in a powerful way. To learn more and begin your pilgrimage of a lifetime, contact your local travel advisor today.
All right, so we are now back from commercial break. Thank you again for being here with us. So now we'll talk. Obviously, we're in present time now, so we'll definitely talk about the pilgrim experience today. So within the last 10 years of the miraculous visits, 2 million pilgrims have visited the site. And in October of 1930, the church declared Our Lady of Fatima worthy of belief. So it's definitely seen a lot of pilgrims come between that time. And to this day, the largest crowds of pilgrims gather on May 13th and October 13th. So,
which is why your question was perfect. Like, why do people go during these times?
Absolutely. And we kind of like, from what I've seen in the trajectories that our company has been on, it's kind of like around like that October, like, mid-October to line up with this. So that's, definitely opened my eyes to that. So, and then of course the news did not spread widely outside of Spain and Portugal until St. Lucia's memories began being published in the late 30s there. So a couple of highlights of the experience, of course, is going to be the Sanctuary of Fatima. So this is the Chapel of the Apparitions on the exact spot of Mary's appearances. And then, we also have the torchlight rosary processions, thousands of candles lit as pilgrims pray in many languages. That's a question that we also get a lot is, do masses have to be, and prayers, do they have to be in Latin? What language is acceptable?
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty common that they'll do the Novus Ordo masses in multiple languages. So if you're not traveling on one of our pilgrimages and bringing a priest with you, or if there's not a priest that's going, you'll attend most likely the mass times in English. So they're open to anybody. If you bring a priest with you, they have several different chapels we can choose between, but we'll arrange private masses, and your priest that's traveling with you can actually celebrate the mass. They don't have to con-celebrate, so you guys can have a private mass in these locations.
Awesome. That's a question we get a lot. And then, of course, the acts of penance, pilgrims walk on their knees across the great Esplanade. Did I say that right?
Yeah.
Very good.
So the great Esplanade.
Esplanade, okay. So
you were pretty close.
Yeah, if you guys know me from webinars and stuff, I tend to pronounce things a little off sometimes. So you'll offline, you'll always correct me, and that always helps to my benefit there. And then, of course, some other interesting parts that make Fatima so special there. Homes of the Children, visit St. Lucia's, Francisco's, Jacinita's simple house of the Adjustal there. Again, probably mispronounced.
In Adjustal, yeah. And then, other sacred sites, the Valenhos. So that was the apparition site after the children were freed, where they were temporarily imprisoned. And then going to Loca de Cabezo. So this is the Angel of Peace site where the first appearance happened. And I just want to cut John off here and share a few final thoughts. So much about Fatima is history, but when you talk to pilgrims and they actually have gotten to go and experience, most of them say, I know the history of the site, but when I prayed the rosary in the square, I realized it was about my life right now, my family, my struggles, my desires for peace. Another pilgrim, walking on my knees was painful, but every step became a prayer. I left with peace I hadn't felt in years. And, volunteers have talked about, spending time there. They came to serve the sick, but they discovered that they gave me faith. And, so it's really a pilgrimage. When you're going to Fatima, it's not a vacation. It's about the chance to interact with something higher than yourself and to really feel the spirit there and know that all these miraculous things happened. If you guys are interested in a visual representation, I highly recommend watching the 2020 Fatima film by director Marco Pontecorvo. We don't normally do shout outs, but I personally got to watch this film. And it really helped me learn more about the story, and it was a wonderful representation. The actors really took such care to portray it as realistically as possible. So if you're interested in kind of seeing a visual representation of the events at Fatima and kind of all of the controversy and things that were going around, that's a really, I recommend that. It's a very faith-filled director that really tried to tell the story, with as much truth and grace and seriousness as possible.
Awesome. I'm sure our advisors appreciate that, especially if they're not as familiar with this particular destination or pilgrimage like this here. So thank you for, kind of giving us the history of Fatima. And just to, wrap this up here, just to recap here, Fatima, it's not about physical healing like Lourdes. Her message is as urgent now as in 1917. The world still longs for peace, and it begins with hearts turning back to God. So we definitely want to invite advisors to come to Fatima with ETS, ask us questions about it if you're not familiar with it. Pray where Mary prayed and appeared to the children. Stand where the sun danced, and hope that Mary's message of peace can still change hearts and minds. So of course, we'll end it with a tagline here. In Fatima, Mary's message of peace becomes personal, and it may just transform you. So we definitely hope you all enjoyed this episode of the ETS Travel Podcast. Definitely like, subscribe, download our podcast wherever you do get your podcasts from. It definitely helps us out a lot. Your support definitely means so much to us. And of course, tell us how we're doing. Give us good feedback. Let us know what we could be doing better. Hopefully, we're already doing a good enough job. We don't get any of that, but we definitely appreciate your viewership. The feedback that we've already gotten has been so valuable, and we definitely love and appreciate you all. So until the next time, we'll see you on the next episode here.
All right. Goodbye, everybody.